प्रसन्नवदनं ध्यायेत् सर्वविघ्नोपशान्तये ईश्वरो गुरुरात्मेति मूर्तिभेदविभागिने व्योमवद्व्याप्तदेहाय दक्षिणामूर्तये नमः। ॐ सहना भवतु सहनौ भुनक्तु सह वीर्यं करवावहै तेजस्विनावधीतमस्तु मा विद्विषावहै। ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः।
Nice to see you all. Recognize most faces. So anyway, the topic of today's talk is devotion. So whenever I used to hear this word devotion, first response I would feel within myself, reaction, would be feeling intimidated. Because when you think of devotion, the first reaction you always feel inadequate. Really. So after all, because devotion means then we think of all the great devotees in our tradition, in our culture, in our mythology. And when you think of all these big devotees and their stories, so naturally it all seems like romantic to us. It's all good for idealism. But where do I fit in, So am I even capable of such kind of devotion that is always described, in the great souls? And forget, am I capable, will I ever be able to have it and experience it? And these are the kinds of things that we think about. So got me to thinking, what exactly is devotion? What is this thing that we talk about? Is devotion, is it cognitive? Is it some kind of a thought process? Or is it some kind of an emotion? Of course it's not the physical body. That's all that is left. So what is it? Obviously it's not thinking. It's not really cognitive thinking. Is it emotion? Just devotion equate to emotion? Which is one way people often, tend to think. Then if it is emotion, then that means, does it mean that in order to be devotional, I have to be emotional? If I don't have emotions, that means I can't have devotion. Is it that kind of a thing? After all, what are emotions? So when you look at, then you think about emotions. Now there are certain emotions which are considered as basic, primary emotions, basic emotions. So for example, fear. It's something is a response, that occurs right away. It's a right brain response, if you want to get into brains, right brain, that it's an instant response. Or sadness, or anger. These are very fundamental emotions, joy, that we feel. Let's look at this. Let me ask you, in your mind, just visualize these emotions in your mind. Just see what happens, what comes to your mind when I say these words. Anger, sadness, anxiety, worry, fear, joy. So when I say these words, we all get you recollect certain emotional states that we have experienced. And we can safely assume that most of us experience similar kinds of, at least similar responses in our own minds. We've all experienced these things. Now, I will say a word, devotion. Close your eyes and so visualize, think of devotion. Now what happens? What happens? So do you get some kind of a response inside like we got for anger, for fear, or anxiety? These kinds of things. Does it sound familiar? No, it doesn't. So each one, do you think we all think the same thing when I said the word devotion? Or we thought of different things? Just some safe assumption is that we thought of a variety of things. So when I say devotion, so somebody thinks of Mirabai.
Yes, that's what I thought.
Yeah. Somebody thinks of Numanji. Somebody thinks of their friend who sits in front of the altar and cries with tears flowing down her cheeks. Somebody doesn't know what to think. So we get varieties of responses. What does that mean? That means devotion is not an emotion. It's not a particular emotion. It's not a particular primary emotion that we know what it is. Like we know all these other emotions. So what is it then? It's not thinking. It's not a particular emotion. Then how would you describe devotion? Well, think about it a little bit. So I would say, so devotion is a state of the mind that is made up of, is a sentiment that is evoked in one's mind, in one's psyche. A sentiment which is complex, which is made up of a variety of thoughts and emotions. So there is affection. There's something I'm devoted to. So there has to be some affection. There is respect. There is reverence. There is love. So there is variety of emotions that go together to constitute this particular sentiment called as a devotion. And it is also in the context of a relationship. It is something like love. Devotion is often compared to love. So the word for devotion in Sanskrit is bhakti. So parama prema swarupa bhakti. They will say bhakti is a special form of love. So what is this special we'll look at? But then the word love is always used to equate it to devotion. To love God. It's not an easy thing to do. It's easy to say. I can't even love my own spouse properly, or my neighbor, or some human being. Then how am I going to love this entity, which then I define as being unknowable? So God is supposed to be unknowable, and I'm supposed to love this unknowable entity. How I can't love known things? How am I going to love unknown things? I'm not going to love unknown things. Impossible. So it's just except I imagine all kinds of stuff in my mind. So here if I say something like love, which is, you can't really give a single word, it's not a single emotion, but it's a complex sentiment, which has varieties of emotions associated with it. And this love is something, suppose your son comes to you, you have a teenager, and this teenager comes to you, your son. He's now, say, 18 or 20 years old, and says, Dad, I have a question to ask you. What is it? I'm an adult now, I'm 20 years old, and then I would like to know what is this love? So when I was young, I used to ask him, and you used to tell me, you wait till you're an adult. Now I've become an adult, so I have this question for you now. Please tell me. I want to explain. I'm old enough. You think I'm old enough to love? I said, of course you're old enough. So what? How do I know, experience this love? So what will you say? What will you say as a father? So of course, as a father, you say, please ask your mother. Why don't you check this with your mother? So she's better at these things. So you pass him off to your mother. So then he goes to his mother. So just love. Do you love Dad? Yes, of course I love him. So can you please tell me what is this particular emotion? And I also want to know what is love. So she says, well, it's not something that you can really describe. But then when you when you love somebody, you will know it. That's another funny answer, You will know somehow that is the right thing. Hey, how am I going to know? If I don't know the emotion, how am I going to know that this is what is love? No. So that can I do something in order to experience love? No. There's nothing you can really do to experience love. Love is something that has to happen. It has to happen. Oh, so really? Will it happen to me? Yes, it's going to happen to you. How do you know that? How do you say it's going to happen? No. Because it is a sentiment. So that is there in every human being. It is their potential in all. And when the environment is right, well, now you give a whole complicated explanation. When the environment is right, the love manifests. Correct? Isn't this the truth? Okay. When the environment is right, then the love that is there in a potential form in your heart is going to manifest. It is going to actualize. And then you will know. Oh, okay. What is the proper environment? That's a topic for another talk. Anyway. So then somehow you answer some question. Now devotion is something like that. Devotion also requires a certain environment. Requires a certain environment. And it is there in all. How do you know it is there in all? How do I know? Oh, because I am a human being. After all, what is love? Love is a sentiment that arises in the context of another person, another being. And so the devotion is a sentiment that arises in relating, when you are relating to the Lord. To the Lord. It's a relationship between an individual and the Lord. Who's this Lord? Well, however we think of the Lord, doesn't really matter at this point. But, so however, whatever that word means to me, however I visualize that being, so there is a relationship between the cause, between the effect and the cause, between the source from which I have come. So between the creator and the created, I see myself as a created being, and then there is a creator. And it's a relationship between the creator and the created. In our tradition, so we look upon the creator as the total, as the totality. It's a relationship between the total and the individual. Or in other words, between who's the devotee and the Lord. Okay. So then between these two, it's a relationship after all. A relationship to understand. How do I understand this relationship? So devotion is a relationship between one devotee and the Lord, and his or her Lord. I understand this relationship as I understand any relationship. To know what devotion is, really, we have to know what are relationships. How much we understand a relationship. What is a relationship after all? So relating, I relate to this word, correct? Is relating to something the same as a relationship? So relating is not a relationship, really speaking. We relate. We relate to objects. We relate to the world. Even animals relate. Even animals relate. An animal will relate to the world. It relates to objects. It knows what is food, what is not food, what is to be eaten, what is not to be eaten, who's an enemy, who's a foe, who's a friend. who to run away from, who to be comfortable with. It relates to the world. The more you know the environment, the better you are able to relate to it. But then, it doesn't have a relationship the way we understand relationships. It does relate in some kind of a way, but it relates based on its own needs, based on its own instincts and its needs. So what is it in the environment that fulfills my needs, and what is it that doesn't fulfill my needs? That is the depth of its relationship. It has no concepts of duties, of expectations, of disappointments. When one duck doesn't complain, the other duck, it doesn't understand me. You don't listen to me. So you have never understood me. We've been married for 40 years. And all these kinds of things, the ducks don't talk to each other. I see in my back there are ducks. So they're walking up and down. They communicate with each other. They relate to each other. So there are a lot of interactions go on. But they don't have these kinds of quack fightings like we do. So they relate to the world, but they don't have any deep relationships with expectations and so on. But when we relate, we can also relate like that as human beings, where we relate to people, so in terms of our own needs. So who is the person who fulfills my needs? To what extent they do, to what extent they don't, how much they can be manipulated. We can really categorize people. So like customers, if you're in a business and then you are trying to sell something, you're sitting in your shop, and people are going up and down the mall, and then you look at each one. What do you see? You see a potential buyer. Is a potential buyer or not a buyer? They can tell. The minute you walk in, they can tell. So accordingly, you decide how much time you're going to spend with them, or you don't. So you don't want to waste time on somebody who's not going to buy anything from you. So it's purely need-based. This is also relating to people. But you can't do this with your wife. That's different. So there, in order for me to relate to a person, so what is it that makes a relationship rich and fulfilling? In order to relate to somebody, the more I understand, just think of this, the more I understand a person, the better I'm able to relate to them. Isn't that so? The less I understand a person, the more my relationship is centered on my own needs. It's more self-centered, really. In order for a relationship to grow and to be fulfilled and satisfactory, the more I know the other person, the better I'm able to relate to them. Because in that understanding, I don't misinterpret. So communication becomes better. I don't ascribe wrong intent to the other person. So the better I know the person, the better I am able to relate to anything. The less I know, the more incomplete and frustrating is the relationship. Now just think, this is true also for Bhagavan, for the Lord. It has to be true. This is how I understand the Lord. How I understand. Normally in a relationship, so what kind of a stand do we take? So this is who I am. You want to relate to me, this is who I am. You relate, you see. What you see is what you get. I am being very open. So what you see is what you get. It's all not true. This is all nice dialogue. But really it's not true. So you have to be open and communicative and be transparent. It's not what you see, what you get. This is not the way to relate to a person. One has to. Normally we don't reveal ourselves to anybody fully.
Is it because we don't even know
Yeah.
ourselves?
Partly we don't know ourselves. partly we relate the way we are going to be accepted by the other person. I relate to people, I present myself. How do we present ourselves to people? Differently, depending on who it is. Because I want to be accepted by everybody. So depending on what aspect of me is acceptable, that's what I'm going to present to that person. I'm not going to present a part of me which may not be acceptable. So it's always selective. It's always selective. It's never complete. That's the idea. Whether it's right or wrong, that's another issue. But at this point, it's never complete. It's always partial. But to relate properly, I need to understand what I'm relating to, so that I can understand. I can relate in a realistic way and in an appropriate way. When we relate to the Lord, so we have our own understanding of what the Lord is. We even have a problem, I tell you, in our tradition we see this. So whenever they are building a temple, this is a typical issue that comes about. What deity to put there? Should we have Shiva or should we have Vishnu? This is a big question. So the Shaivais want Shiva there, Lingam. The Vaishnavas want some Vaishnava form. And the both have genuine difficulty with the other one. It's not a simple difficulty. The genuinely, this is God means this form. Any other form becomes difficult to relate to. Just imagine this now. Okay? I'm having difficulty even between two forms, both of which I acknowledge as God. Just look at this. And then my tradition teaches me, you look at God on everything as Bhagavan. How am I going to look at everything as Bhagavan when I am having such difficulty with two forms, both of which I acknowledge as Bhagavan? But then I can't figure, it's like, it's something like, so a lady or a man, either side. So this fellow, she looks at her husband and she sees that, she sees him only as the husband. Because after all, when I am relating, this is her logic. When I am relating to this man, he is my husband. So I should relate to him as a husband, as a wife to a husband. I'm not his mother. Naturally, I'm not his mother. I'm not his daughter. I'm not his grandmother, whatever. I am his wife. And he's my husband. So this man, is he a good husband or is he a bad husband? That's the one way to relate. But then if I think like that, am I relating to the whole person? Or am I relating to just one facet of the person? Because this person is not just a husband. This person is also a father. This person is also a son. He is also a brother. He is also so many things. So the more I know of who he is, what he is, the better I am able to relate to him. Not necessarily as a mother. Just because I understand him as a son doesn't mean I relate to him as a mother. But because I understand him as a son, I can relate to him better as a wife. Correct? That's true for everybody. So the more complete I understand a person, the better I am able to relate and understand my relationship to that person. That's the nature of relationships. It is. Now if I am relating to the Lord, let us say, I come to the, how do I understand the Lord? I have to understand the Lord now. Is he a provider? Do I look upon him as a provider? Whatever I need, the Lord should provide. We know the Lord provides everything. But then in relating to the Lord, I only see him as somebody who gives me what I need or gives me what I want. Then what happens? So sometimes he doesn't do that. Sometimes he does it. Sometimes he doesn't do it. So now the problem is either he is being arbitrary or I am being, so my expectations are wrong. There's only two possibilities. So generally it's always he is being arbitrary. So because he only has preference for his devotees, all kinds of things, then I have problem. Why has the Lord forsaken? Who doesn't complain about that? So the Lord forsakes people. He is not reliable. Can't depend on him. This is true. Naturally, it all follows. So how am I going to relate to that? So if the Lord is something, who is going to just fulfill my needs, whether they are reasonable or not, whether my expectation, then I am going to be disappointed in that relationship. So we understand the Lord usually as some kind of a powerful person, being, individual, who is there to fulfill my reasonable and unreasonable desires, just because I happen to pray or do something. So some kind of a trade or bargain or bribery or whatever we call it. Doesn't work. So I have to understand what is Bhagavan. Here is how we understand the Lord. So in looking at this, we see in relationships as we grow, one thing which is very fundamental in our growth process for every human being, as we grow, we first have no awareness of ourselves or of our environment when we are born. We just have needs. We feel hungry, we feel thirsty, we are comfortable, we are uncomfortable, we are dependent, we need to be taken care of and protected and nurtured. And so the environment provides us with that, if it does. So the mother is there, the father is there, caretakers are there. So I am taken, my needs are fulfilled. But then the way my needs are fulfilled is not always predictable or reliable. Because the people around me are not perfect. They are fallible. They are fallible, they are not infallible. They make mistakes. So I am hungry. And the mom thinks I am sleepy. Or I am sleepy, mom thinks I am hungry. So this miscommunication is there. Not on the, is it the baby's part? No. Or the mother's part? Both parts. Neither the baby can communicate nor the mother can figure out right away. It's all a learning process. So as the environment becomes unpredictable, so my trust in the environment goes down naturally, because it is not responding to my needs. So my whole childhood goes like that, in some degree of, so trust and mistrust like that. And the environment, my caretakers, people who are supposed to be infallible, become fallible. As I get older and I become cognizant of that, then I turn to others outside my immediate environment, other adults. So like teachers, like uncles, someone who is outside the immediate family. Because I figured out the immediate family you can't totally depend on. Sometimes they'll give you what you want, sometimes they won't give you what you want. The outside ones are better. So that's when the kids always go through that, the aunts are always better than the mothers. So because they are more responsive, they give you more and things like that. But slowly that also wears off. Other adults wear off. Then you meet somebody and then you think this person is now going to, because this is the only person who thinks you're great. So then this person is going to now fulfill all my needs. Then that also becomes. So like that, so I realized that there's nobody around here on this beautiful earth that is going to be predictable and reliable in fulfilling my needs. Then somebody says, oh no, there is somebody who's outside this world. And this other person up in the sky, above the whatever, high up in the sky, somewhere he's sitting, and he is going to fulfill. He loves you. Oh really? Here nobody loves me. It's not, somebody is there, up there. How do you know he loves me and all that? Anyway, no, you just accept what I'm telling you. He loves you. He told me that he loves you. And so you just better believe it. And you start believing it. Okay, maybe this person loves me. And then all kinds of promises, etc. You know the whole story. Then this person also, you start praying. You know, when I was young, this is true story, it's not a false, it's true. Not a story, it's true. So then I, in school, so some subjects are easy, some are difficult. Then you have to go for exam. When you go for exam, you pray.
Yes.
Parents also say you better pray, So the less you study, the more you pray. It's a simple rule. The less you say, the more you. So then in the morning I'll go and pray. So go and take the exam. So you pass. You're happy. Oh, thank God. You come there, you thank the Lord and everything. Next time again, exams have a way of recurring. So again, next month another exam. Again you pray. Hey, somehow you passed. Even though I didn't study, I passed. Next month again exam comes. I same pray. Now little bit you take for granted, So next time again you pray and go. This time I failed. Oh, maybe God was busy or something. Something miscommunication happened. Then next time again little bit of repetition you pray. Because maybe something happened like this. What is that coincidence? So this next time also you fail. Now it becomes a big problem. Second failure now. Just once is a coincidence. Second time is not a coincidence now. Second time is an incident. It's an incident, not a coincidence. And third time, someone is after you. There is some diabolical plot. I learned this from a James Bond movie. You remember, right?
But once is happenstance, twice is coincidence, 3 times is enemy action.
See, so that is general. So this is the rule. First time is a happening, second time is a coincidence, third time is a plot. So now third time also exam comes. Now what do? Should I not pray? Just because 2 times God didn't reply. Third time, if I'm practical, I'll say, it's not working. But then I'm so up, I don't want to take a chance. So you end up praying. But your trust goes down. Definitely, little bit. Trust goes down. At least is not so reliable as I thought. But still you have no choice. So you better just, you hedge your bets and you pray. If we understand the Lord then as somebody who's infallible in terms of granting me what I want, but then that is not how we understand the Lord. It is not that whether the Lord is fallible or not. We understand Bhagavan. Bhagavan is a word for the Lord. I don't like to use the word Lord because it has certain meaning associated with it. So I use the word Bhagavan. So now Bhagavan is that, it's not that Bhagavan is he infallible or is he fallible. The question is when I look around me at the universe, I find that, so in the universe there are laws. There is an order. And the more I look at it, I recognize that this order is not fallible. It is infallible. Because everything moves according to a certain, predetermined order, a pattern. There are laws, whether it's astronomy, whether it's physiology, it's anatomy, whether it's, in fact, we have science because there is order. We have science because there is law. People think that science disproves the Lord. In fact, science proves the Lord. Because science, the very existence of science, is dependent on the existence of an order. It is not chaos around us. Even in chaos, there is order. There is a chaos theory. Somebody was one time explaining what is chaos theory. My first question in my own mind was, if it is a theory, why are you calling it chaos? The fact that you are sitting and telling me about chaos theory, when you can theorize something, that means there is order there. It is not chaotic. In chaotic, you won't have theory. Yeah. So it is the order. It is the infallible that is Bhagavan. It is not whether Bhagavan is infallible. It is the infallible that what we see as the very order itself, as manifest Bhagavan. Bhagavan manifests in the form of an order. When I recognize this, then I have to relate. When I relate to the Lord, and this is the totality, I look upon Bhagavan as the total and me the individual. So it is the individual relating to the total, which means the individual who can never be apart from the total. The total includes the individual. The total is not separate from the individual. But then in order to relate, I separate myself out. I have to necessarily. Otherwise I can't relate. I am part of the total. I am not separate from the Lord. But then if I have to relate as an individual to the Lord, I have to separate myself as an individual. If I separate myself, then I am not relating to the total. I am relating to an aspect of the total. Correct? It is just an aspect of the total in order to relate. Otherwise, because I have separated myself out and I see myself as a created being, so that becomes the source, and I relate to the source, and I becomes an aspect of the source, and different aspects of the source are represented in the form of various deities in our tradition. Like a person is the same, but then that person is a father, is a mother, he's a father, he's a son, he's a husband, he's a friend. It's the same one person who is different things depending on who he is the reference point. You shift the reference point and there is another person. A different person manifests. When the father comes into the picture, the son manifests. The son shows himself, reveals himself. The son manifests himself. When the child comes into the picture, the father is evoked. When the wife comes into the room, the husband is evoked. When a friend walks in the door, the friend is evoked. When he thinks of the Lord, the devotee is evoked. That is what is evoking. Devotion has to be evoked. In order for me to evoke the devotion to evoke, I have to visualize the Lord. Whichever form doesn't matter. It is a process. Devotion is not about the form. Devotion is about the process. So you think God really cares? Just imagine. Suppose God. And we are all puny little beings with all our great thinking. So do you think we can really fully think anything properly? No. If we did, we won't be in so much mess in our life. So obviously our thinking is messy most of the time. So with this messy mind, I'm trying to visualize the Lord. Is it ever going to be right? So if you were the Lord, would you care? Would you really care? If you're the parent, forget the Lord. As a parent, Your child looks upon you. Do you think your child looks upon you correctly? As to who you are as a person? Who understands you? Even your spouse doesn't understand. You don't understand yourself. No way your kid understands you fully. So one day the kid will say, Mom, you don't love me. One day you love me. You don't care of me. You're not buying me what I want. They have 100 different complaints they have. But do you really care? Does it matter to you? Because you know it's the child thinking. You can relate to this so well. And you think God really seriously gets upset just because we don't think of Him in one particular way? Oh no, these people worship me in so many forms. They make an idol of me. These people don't make an idol of me. And so these people are, so these are my special people. This is all childish thinking. Even as a parent you don't think this. You think really God thinks like this? I don't think anybody really believes this. Maybe some people believe it seriously, I don't know. But then it's difficult for me to visualize anybody seriously thinking like this. So irrespective of how we visualize the Lord, it doesn't matter, but it is the relationship. In that context, as I recognize the infallible in which I live, and I am a part of that total, and that a certain sentiment is evoked. In Ramayana, there is a Adhyatma Ramayana, there is a dialogue between Sri Rama and Shabari. So in which he talks to her about Bhakti Sadhana. What are the means of devotion? What are the means by which I create this environment where devotion is evoked? Because you say you have to create an environment. What kind of an environment do I create? So like you tell your son, well, you have to have the right environment. What does that mean? Don't sit in your room all the time. You go out and meet people, be friendly, be honest, all kinds of things, whatever advice we give them. So because then you create a situation, right? So here Sri Rama tells her the means by which that bhakta gets evoked. And in that means what he talks about? He talks about prayer. He talks about maturity. He talks about study, reflection, contemplation. These are the different means that we have in our spiritual pursuit. These are the things he talks about as the means for creating the environment where the devotion is evoked in a person. It's called disciples. So thus, it is a sentiment that has to be evoked. And one of the which is in the form of a prayer. Prayer is one means. Because what do we do in prayer? We invoke the Lord. We say we invoke the Lord. Whatever we understand as the Lord, we invoke. And when we invoke, it's not really a matter of we invoking something which is not there. Like some magician. We have this power, this Shakti we have, by which we take an idol there. And by these mantras that we do, we invoke the Lord out of nowhere. Is that what happens? The Lord is there everywhere. Correct? Lord is there everywhere. When I invoke the Lord, it's not that the Lord was having a nap there somewhere and I kind of pulled him down here like that with my own praise. It's not like that. Sometimes we visualize these things, with this Shakti, big Shakti, this Rishi, this person, he brought Shiva down, poor thing, disturbed him from whatever he was doing. Bhagavan is everywhere. And when I invoke His presence. That means I recognize it, that's all. It's not that the Lord takes a trip and comes down to be in front of me. It is just that I recognize the Lord's presence in something which is already there. I didn't really invoke anything, literally. But what I did was, I evoked. In invoking, I really evoked the devotee. It's like when you close your eyes and you think of your father, who gets evoked? The son gets evoked. When you think of your son, the father gets evoked. Just close your eyes. When you think of your neighbor, all your anger gets evoked. There's not a big magic in this. It's simple dynamics of the mind. So the angry guy gets evoked. When I think of the Lord, sometimes, now just look back. If I visualize God as somebody who has to pass me my exams and whatnot, then when I think of that Lord, who will get evoked? Either the disappointed guy, or the happy guy, or the whiny guy, you know. But if I understand properly, that's not what this relationship is about. Really. And the more I understand, the more I learn to see Bhagavan in things, that divinity that we talked about earlier, the easier it is that environment becomes right, and then that devotee has to manifest. Like the love has to manifest. Nobody can talk about it, nobody can do anything about it. But we all know it happens. And the reason it happens is because, so that is the nature of a human heart. This relationship is there, it's real. So between the Creator, I see I am a created being. I didn't create myself and bring myself here. So Creator has to involve a Creator. The individual is connected with the total. This is a fundamental relationship which is universal. We are all related to the same Lord in the same way. There is no differences here between people, whether we like it or not. Really. Even that guy, some guy, who's the bad guy, does all wrong things, chooses to do all wrong things, creates misery around. Do you think his relationship with God is different than ours? Yeah, just think about it. You have two children. One becomes a great, gets educated, is successful, straightforward, law-abiding. Other one becomes a jailbird, unfortunately. Goes in and out of Mama's house. We call it Uncle's house. But really speaking, is the relationship different? As a mother, as a father?
Could be.
The relationship, you're still the parent, whether you like it or not. You will say that, this is my karma. But he is my son. That's all the difference. We are born with good karma and bad. This is good karma, this is bad karma. Both have to be fulfilled. Whatever, you will sit down and have a philosophy. But the fact remains that they are both my sons. God can't disown anyone. So we are all related the same way. There is nobody special here. Nobody is special. Oh, this is a wise man. This is another wise man. This is all God doesn't say. I don't suppose. I don't suppose. Bhagavan will think like that. So that is the context in which bhakta gets evoked. And we create the environment in our spiritual pursuits. And then devotion manifests differently. How does it manifest? Like love manifests in different ways. Parama Prema Swarupa Bhakti, when they talk about the love of devotion, is different. There are different types of love. Love is not a uniform definition, The nature of love depends on the context, obviously. It depends on who it is that the love is directed towards. My love for parents is different than love from children, is different than my love for my profession, is different from love for my art, love for my spouse. Some love is based on artha-kama pursuits. The word for love is prema. The word for love is also kama. It's the same word in English, but we have two different words. It's contextual. So the pursuit is the artha related love for money, love for certain artha pursuits, worldly pursuits, love for success, then love for pleasure, artha kama, love for dharma. This love that we talk about, devotion, is in the context of spiritual pursuit. Love for the Lord is different. So that is the context. And now this manifests, how does it manifest? Variety of ways. We can't say only by in a certain form. Who was a better bhakta, Mirabai or Hanumanji? Well, let us make a list. What did Mirabai do? What did Hanumanji do? What was his attitude? What was her attitude? How did he respond in this situation? How did she? This is how you analyze? No. It's different.